Okay, so picture this. You're finally tackling that kitchen reno you've been putting off, and you're ripping up those old tiles. But as you pry up the first one, something catches your eye, like a human jawbone, just staring back at you from the dusty underlayment.
Wow, that's quite a find. It really is amazing how those echoes of the past can turn up in the most unexpected places.
Right. It got me thinking about how much history is actually hidden in plain sight all around us.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be unearthing a whole bunch of recent discoveries.
Yeah.
Stuff that's reframing history, challenging our assumptions, might even make you want to double-check your own floors. Just in case.
Sounds like it.
From stolen ruby slippers
Oh, wow.
to whispers from ancient battlefields, we're going deep into the stories that are changing how we view the past.
Sounds like we've got a lot to cover.
We do. And we're going to start things off with a real-life Hollywood heist. Remember those iconic ruby slippers that got snatched from the Judy Garland Museum?
Oh, yeah.
Well, guess what? They're going up for auction, and the museum is trying to buy them back.
Wow. You know, what makes that whole thing even more interesting is that the museum didn't actually own the slippers when they were stolen. They were on loan from a private collector.
Ugh, adding insult to injury. And to make things even crazier, the thief's lawyer actually claimed he thought the rubies were real. Can you believe that?
That's a tough one to believe.
It really is.
But you know what? In kind of a clever twist, the museum's turned this whole mess into something positive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They now have this ruby slipper theft tour, attracting visitors and, making the best of a bad situation.
Talk about making lemonade. All right, well, let's trade in those glitzy slippers for some ancient murals and head over to Pompeii, where archaeologists are always uncovering new wonders.
Pompeii is just this incredible treasure trove of history, frozen in time. And the newest discovery: a lavish banquet room decked out with stunning murals depicting scenes from the Trojan War.
That's so cool. But here's the weird thing. The murals are all painted on this black background. Not exactly typical Roman decor, is it?
Well, it might seem a little odd at first, but archaeologists think it was a deliberate design choice. The black background may have been used to, hide smoke stains from those oil lamps. Just a clever little way to keep the banquet halls looking spick and span.
Ancient interior design hacks. You gotta love it. Pompeii never fails to surprise. And speaking of surprises, archaeologists also found some, well, let's just say, risque drawings in a nearby staircase. Something tells me those would have made even the most jaded Pompeian blush.
It seems like Pompeii always delivers the unexpected. But let's go beyond the city walls for a second, because the same eruption that buried Pompeii also preserved tons of knowledge in the form of scrolls. And researchers are finally deciphering them, unlocking all these secrets about the philosopher Plato.
Are you talking about that History of the Academy scroll?
Exactly. And it's presenting us with a very different picture of Plato's life than what we've always believed. For example, it claims that Plato was actually captured and enslaved after Socrates' death.
Wow, that's a plot twist. It's amazing how new discoveries can completely change how we understand these iconic figures from the past. But speaking of history being rewritten, our next stop takes us to the battlefield of Culloden, where a simple shoe buckle is telling a pretty powerful story.
It's incredible how such a seemingly insignificant object can hold so much weight. This particular buckle was found near a piece of grape shot, leading researchers to think it might have belonged to a wounded Jacobite leader.
Oh, well.
You can almost imagine, right, a tangible connection to a key moment in Scottish history, all thanks to this tiny buckle.
It's like chilling. It makes you wonder what other stories are waiting to be unearthed right beneath our feet. And speaking of mysteries, there's that infamous Voynich manuscript. It's still baffling experts. But there's a new theory suggesting it might be focused on a pretty surprising topic: women's sexual health.
Yeah, it's a very interesting theory. The author argues that the manuscript's mysterious code was a form of self-censorship to protect sensitive info in a time when those topics were totally taboo. If true, it gives us this unique glimpse into women's lives during a time when their voices were often completely silenced.
It's a good reminder that history is full of hidden stories, and we're really only just beginning to find them. Speaking of uncovering surprising journeys, did you know that chickens conquering the world can be traced back to the ancient Silk Road?
It's true. By looking at eggshell fragments, archaeologists have actually been able to map the spread of domesticated chickens all across Central Asia and the sheer number of eggshells they found. It points to these not just being wild birds. These were chickens laying year-round, changing diets and cultures along the way.
Sounds like those chickens were real trailblazers. But history isn't always about ancient civilizations and faraway lands. Sometimes it's about bringing to light the stories hidden right here in our own backyard. And that's what the Dickory Project is all about. They're working to make their archive of Japanese Americans imprisoned during WWII accessible on Ancestry.com.
It's a fantastic resource, allowing people to connect with their family histories and uncover a painful part of American history.
It's a reminder that history is deeply personal, and every single story deserves to be told. But sometimes history itself is under threat. Like, take the iconic Stonehenge. It might end up on UNESCO's World Heritage in Danger list.
Yeah, it's pretty controversial. A proposed tunnel project near Stonehenge is raising concerns about the potential for damage. So now there's a whole debate about balancing progress and preservation.
Tough call. Progress is important, but so is protecting our shared heritage. Speaking of heritage, there's a newly acquired Lavinia Fontana painting that's finally making its public debut after centuries hidden away in private collections.
Yeah, Portrait of Bianca degli Utili and her children offers this glimpse into Renaissance family life, and it really showcases Fontana's skill. It's like a window into a different time.
It's amazing how art can transport us. But what about a window into a time so distant it's hard to even comprehend? We've got to talk about this discovery in South Africa. There's this strangely symmetrical rock, and it sparked a whole debate. Could it be a 130,000-year-old sand sculpture of a stingray?
If it is, it would be the oldest known example of humans depicting other creatures. Imagine a piece of art created over 100,000 years ago. It's mind-blowing.
Totally mind-boggling. And speaking of mind-blowing, we got to talk about this. Move over, Michelangelo. It looks like there might have been a Neanderthal artist among us. This juvenile barebone found in Germany could be the oldest decorative art in Eurasia.
And the markings on the bone, they look intentional, suggesting a level of artistry and symbolic thought that we're only just beginning to understand. It challenges a lot of our preconceived notions about Neanderthals.
It seems like the past is whispering to us everywhere we turn, like those massive rock engravings along the Orinoco River in Venezuela. They're thought to be ancient territory markers.
Those engravings are more than just simple markings, though. They're like a visual language, connecting us to the people who came before us. They depict snakes, animals with religious significance, and human figures. It's this rich tapestry of symbols just waiting to be fully understood.
Speaking of deciphering symbols, one geologist thinks she's cracked the code of the Mona Lisa's mysterious background.
Oh, right. She believes she's pinpointed the location to a specific bridge in northern Italy, based on the rock formations in the painting. It's a fascinating blend of art and science.
I love it when those two worlds collide. And speaking of treasures from the past, a set of 16th century Aztec documents known as the San Andreas Tetepilco Codices has finally been acquired by Mexico.
These historical treasures are finally heading home. It's a victory for cultural heritage.
Speaking of journeys home, let's head to Egypt, where archaeologists excavating a pet cemetery made a pretty surprising discovery. They found love letters.
It's true. Imagine their surprise when, among all the animal remains, they found a bunch of letters written by Roman centurions. They offered these intimate glimpses into their daily lives, hopes, fears, even their romantic longings.
Who knew a pet cemetery could be so romantic? Now, calling all Jane Austen fans. Get ready for this. Volunteers are painstakingly transcribing a memoir written by her brother. His handwriting took a bit of a turn for the worse after he developed arthritis.
Talk about dedication. It makes you wonder what kind of secrets this document might hold.
From love letters to family secrets, it seems the past never runs out of stories, right? And our next stop takes us to Mount Vernon, where archaeologists unearthed a whole collection of intact glass bottles. But here's the twist. They were filled with preserved cherries.
It's like a taste of 18th century food preservation. Can you imagine the flavors?
My mouth is watering just thinking about it. Well, speaking of ancient diets, research suggests that hunter-gatherers in Morocco were enjoying a mostly plant-based diet before agriculture really took off.
And over in ancient Syria, people were feasting on a diet packed with grains and olives. It almost sounds like a modern-day Mediterranean diet.
It's fascinating to trace how dietary trends have changed over time. But one thing that hasn't changed is the importance of sustainability.
Absolutely. And nobody embodies that better than the Native American tribes in Oregon. They've been sustainably harvesting camas bulbs for thousands of years, passing down their knowledge through generations.
This practice involved controlled burns and careful harvesting. It's such a great example of people living in harmony with nature.
It really is. And speaking of ancient practices, high up in the Pyrenees Mountains, archaeologists discovered the earliest evidence of dairy consumption. This pushes back the timeline for this major shift in diet.
Our ancestors sure were adventurous eaters. But for a truly daring drink, how about some of the oldest known wine in liquid form?
There is a little catch. This vintage, found in Spain, wasn't exactly meant for a party. It was in an urn, placed next to cremated remains.
Yeah, I think I'll stick to my modern-day wine. But for those feeling bold, one home brewer in Utah has actually recreated an ancient Egyptian beer recipe using 3,000-year-old yeast.
Cheers to that. It's amazing how we can connect to the past through something as simple as a drink.
Absolutely. Our journey isn't over yet, though. We've got plenty more to discover.
Welcome back to our deep dive into all the latest historical discoveries. Our exploration of ancient drinks actually takes us to Australia now. Archaeologists working with Aboriginal communities on an island off the coast have unearthed something pretty remarkable.
Well, that sounds intriguing. Did they find another ancient brewery?
Not quite, but it's just as cool. They've discovered pottery shards. And get this, these shards date back like 2,000 to 3,000 years.
Wow.
That's centuries before any European contact. This discovery actually challenges the old assumption that pottery making in Australia didn't start until after Europeans arrived.
Wow, that totally changes our understanding of Aboriginal history and technology. It's incredible to think about these communities creating pottery that long ago.
It really is, and you know what's especially fascinating? The way this whole project is being done, the archaeologists are working really closely with the indigenous community, incorporating their knowledge. It's a good reminder that history is often way more complex than we think at first, and that working together is really the key to unlocking all those hidden depths.
It makes you realize how much we can learn when we approach these things with respect for different perspectives. Speaking of unique perspectives, let's change gears a bit. Let's head to a place you wouldn't normally expect to find a home. A lava tube in Saudi Arabia.
You're right, not exactly your typical dwelling, but there's evidence suggesting people actually used this huge lava tube as a shelter for thousands of years. We're talking Neolithic period all the way to the Bronze Age.
A lava tube. That must have been quite an experience. Do we know anything about these, ancient cave dwellers?
Well, based on the rock art and animal remains found inside, it seems they were pastoralists, herding their animals between oases. It's incredible to picture them adapting to such a unique environment.
Talk about resourceful.
Hmm?
It really speaks to our adaptability and ingenuity as humans. Speaking of ingenuity, remember that jawbone we talked about at the beginning? The one found in the kitchen floor?
Yeah, what a surprise that was.
So it turns out, finding fossils in travertine tiles isn't as uncommon as you might think. Travertine is a type of limestone formed near mineral springs, and those springs can be real hot spots for fossilization.
Interesting.
Well, I'm relieved to hear that.
Oh.
I might sleep a little easier knowing I'm not likely to uncover a graveyard under my bathroom. But let's move from ancient dwellings to ancient warriors. Researchers in Greece have been putting replica Mycenaean armor to the test.
Oh yeah, they had modern soldiers do simulated combat wearing that replica armor. It's amazing to see how experimental archaeology can bring the past to life.
So how did the Mycenaean armor hold up? Was it really as strong as the legends say?
Well, it turns out those Mycenaean warriors were very well protected. The test showed that the armor was super durable, really effective at deflecting blows. It also provided some insight into their fighting techniques and just the physical demands those warriors faced.
It must have been pretty cool to see those soldiers testing out the ancient armor. Speaking of challenging assumptions, archaeologists in Massachusetts think they found the home of King Pompey, an enslaved man who became a leader in his community.
Yeah, this discovery is shining a light on a part of Black history that hasn't gotten a lot of attention. It really highlights the resilience and leadership within enslaved communities, despite facing unimaginable hardship.
It's a powerful reminder that history is full of these untold stories, and every discovery gets us closer to a more complete understanding of the past. Speaking of reconsidering what we thought we knew, there's new research adding to the evidence debunking the ecocide myth on Easter Island.
Right. For years, the common narrative has been that the people of Easter Island destroyed their own environment, deforestation and all that. But this new research suggests a much more complex story.
So what really happened on Easter Island?
Well, it seems the ecological changes were more nuanced and probably involved things like climate change and the arrival of European colonists. It's a good reminder that we can't always oversimplify history. We need to constantly reevaluate what we think we know.
It's a reminder that history is rarely simple. We need to be open to new evidence. Speaking of reconsidering what we thought we knew, there's a Tasmanian devil tooth found in Western Australia. It's making us rethink what we know about ancient animal migration and trade networks.
That's right. They found this tooth way outside the Tasmanian devil's normal range, which hints at some kind of ancient trade network spanning huge distances. Just this little clue opens up a whole world of possibilities.
It's crazy to think about how this tiny tooth can tell such a big story.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of unexpected finds, archaeologists in Mexico have discovered lids from ancient Maya beehives.
Yeah, these lids are giving us a glimpse into the long history of beekeeping in the region, showing how important bees and honey were to the Maya.
It's amazing how those everyday objects can connect us to ancient traditions. Speaking of ancient practices, there's a series of pits in France that have archaeologists scratching their heads. The pits are filled with horse skeletons, and they're trying to figure out if the horses were sacrificed or if they were casualties of war.
It's a real mystery. It shows the challenges of figuring out what the archaeological record means. Sometimes the answers are elusive, but even the questions themselves can be fascinating.
Like a historical detective story. Speaking of stories from the deep, shipwrecks always capture our imaginations, right? They provide a window into maritime history.
Definitely. Divers exploring the wreck of the Gribsunden, a Danish warship from the 15th century, found a chest full of ammunition-making tools. It's a fascinating look at medieval military technology.
And get this, some cargo that washed ashore in Portugal is changing what we thought we knew about a 16th century shipwreck. The ocean is full of untold stories, isn't it?
It really is. And researchers are hard at work piecing those stories together. They're carefully tracing the origins of orphan objects found in shipwrecks, trying to connect them back to their vessels.
It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle, each piece revealing a little bit more of the past. Speaking of solving mysteries, they finally found the wreck of the steamship Adelor, vanished in 1909.
That's right. They found it in Lake Superior. Brings closure to a mystery that's lingered for over a century.
And the search for those WWII submarines, the Lost 52, continues. The USS Harder was just recently discovered off the coast of the Philippines.
Each discovery is bittersweet, you know? It's a reminder of the human cost of war, but also brings some closure to families who have been waiting for answers.
Speaking of closure, they found the wreck of the Quest. That's the ship Ernest Shackleton was on when he died back in 1922.
Yeah, it's a poignant discovery. Brings us a little closer to this iconic explorer and his final voyage.
Well, from the depths of the ocean, our deep dive takes us now to the world of ancient medicine.
Oh, that's right. Archaeologists in Poland found an 18th century prosthetic device. It was used to treat a cleft palate. It's an amazing find, showing us how people tackled health challenges back then.
And speaking of health challenges, some skeletal remains in Egypt suggest that ancient scribes suffered from, believe it or not, work-related injuries.
Really?
It seems even back then, sitting at a desk all day could take a toll on your body.
Makes you think, huh?
And down in Mississippi, they found a calcified gallbladder in some bones from a former asylum. It provides a glimpse into the health issues faced by patients in those institutions.
Welcome back. It's amazing how all these different discoveries we've been talking about, from that jawbone in the kitchen to those ancient beehives, it all fits together, you know? It gives us this bigger picture of where we come from.
Yeah, like we're building this massive puzzle of history.
Exactly. And it really struck me how many of these discoveries actually force us to rethink things, like to question what we thought we knew for sure about the past. Absolutely. Take those Aboriginal pottery shards in Australia, for instance. Completely changes what we thought about the origins of pottery making there.
It's a good reminder that we always have more to learn and to stay open to new evidence.
It also shows how important it is to get different perspectives, you know, especially when we're talking about the past. Working with those indigenous communities, getting their insights, that adds a whole new layer of understanding that we wouldn't have otherwise.
It really makes you realize that history isn't just about big events and famous people. It's about the daily lives of everyday people, their struggles, their creativity, and how they shape the world we live in.
Yeah, like those love letters from those Roman centurions we talked about, found in that Egyptian pet cemetery. It humanizes them, right? They weren't just soldiers. They had hopes and fears just like us, even love lives.
And those little details they mention, the cost of things back then, the everyday struggles, it gives us a real feel for what life was like.
Speaking of insights, those discoveries at Pompeii and being able to finally read those ancient scrolls, it's changing how we understand Roman history and philosophy, like what we're learning about Plato's life. Challenges some long-held beliefs, Shows that even the stories we think are set in stone can change when new evidence comes up.
Makes you wonder what other historical truths we might need to reconsider.
Exactly. It just goes to show how important critical thinking is. Questioning assumptions, not just in history, but in life.
For sure. And that research debunking that ecocide myth on Easter Island, it's a cautionary tale. Reminds us to be careful about oversimplifying things, to look at history from different angles.
It's a good reminder that we always need to be willing to challenge our own assumptions and to look at evidence that might contradict what we think we know.
History isn't just about what happened a long time ago. It can teach us a lot about the present and the future, too, like those sustainable practices of Native American tribes, or the ingenuity of the ancient Egyptians. We can learn a lot from them.
Yeah, and that research into ancient diets, it gives us a whole new perspective on things like plant-based eating and the importance of sustainable food production.
And who doesn't love the idea of trying that ancient Egyptian beer made with that 3,000-year-old yeast? It's a fun way to connect with the past.
Definitely. And speaking of connections, those ancient viruses they're finding in Neanderthal bones reminds us that we're all connected. We share this deep evolutionary history.
It makes you think about the vastness of time and our place in it. And those ongoing searches, like the one for the lost 52 submarines or finding Shackleton's ship, The Quest, it's a reminder of the sacrifices people made, whether in war or exploration. And their legacy lives on.
It's true. Every discovery, no matter how big or small, whether it's a shoe buckle on a battlefield or a medical breakthrough, it's all part of a bigger story. It helps us understand not only the past, but ourselves.
It's been quite a journey exploring all these incredible discoveries. Makes you wonder what else is out there waiting to be found, right?
Oh, absolutely. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep an open mind. You never know what you might uncover and what stories those discoveries will tell.
That's great advice. Well, until next time, keep digging, keep learning, and keep that sense of wonder alive. Who knows what treasures the past might reveal?